My name is Filip. I help startups to grow up technically. I worked for MediaBoard, the largest Czech media monitoring company, and MediaBoard is going international. And I'm there to help them make their system scale. I did previously a similar thing for Twisto, a financial startup where we went to several countries. And in my career, I've designed some APIs, I've maintained others, I've used many more. And what I like is that I sometimes create tools for developers, for my colleagues. That's very satisfactory. If you can work with the users that you understand, with people you know, and provide the tools for them. So yeah, that's about me. So what about an API? What is an API? Well, let's ask Wikipedia. According to Wikipedia, an API, the application programming interface, is a way for two or more computer programs to communicate with each other. Well, yeah, makes sense, kind of. I hear this technical definition quite a lot. But I think it's missing a key element. We make software for other people, and we are people. So I would say an API is a way for two or more people to communicate with each other. It's the API consumer and the API provider. And the API is a contract between them. The API provider promises that he will provide a service that works in a certain way so that the API consumer can rely on it. That's important, because most of you probably know how painful it is if the API breaks. Raise your hand, who of you spent some time figuring out either how to upgrade something or why something broke after an upgrade, or had to migrate from a service to something that's essentially the same but replaces the service? Yeah, most of you. So you know why the API stability is important, but still you face this problem in your dependencies. So here I will be going through some examples and some tricks that you might use that I will try to generalize how you can do better in your code. So a lot of software that we depend on is open source. We also depend on some proprietary stuff, some commercial services. It's a mixture. Usually, these are the commercial services and the commercial software that gets this right. You know, you have Microsoft with Windows, the example, that has a very good reputation for stability. Office, the same. You can open very old Excel sheets in recent Excel. Another example would be Amazon with their cloud services. They have also a great record for stability and for not breaking stuff unnecessarily. But the division isn't here, open source or proprietary. For example, Linux, and I mean the kernel, that also is very stable. This is the user space that they break stuff, the distributions and so on. But they've gotten better. But Linux is very stable over the years. And on the other hand, from the commercial world, there is a company that has exceptionally bad reputation for maintaining their services. That would be Google. It has a reputation for time-limited trial. Remember Google Chat, Google Talk, Hangouts, Google Meet? I don't know what is the recent one. And they do it with the APIs as well. There is a website. It's called Google Graveyard, and Google is famous for that. So yeah, in my point of view, the distinction is not between small, big, closed, open, paid, free. It's more about how much do you value your users. Because you're writing software for users. If you are paid for writing software, then you are paid because someone trusts you, someone likes your stuff enough. If you develop open source, you do it because you think someone might find it helpful. So yeah, the distinction is how much you value your users' time and your users' experience. So let's go to some examples. I got the idea for this talk at another conference, actually. I attended a talk on observability and metrics. It's useful if you have a large system to measure some numbers that tell you, I don't know, how many requests per second and so on. So you can understand why something breaks and if it's close to breaking or not. So the talk was about a component in a Kubernetes ecosystem where the person was explaining how to test this observability. And it was a very nice talk. And that person casually mentioned that they got a bug report that the names of their metrics are not according to some standard that the other components in the ecosystem adopted. So he said, oh yeah, there is value in standardization, so we want to change the names, but we cannot do it right away, because there might be people who already consume those metrics, who rely on those names. So we will deprecate those names, and in 2 releases we can remove them. And this is the part which surprised me. You have probably encountered this deprecation cycle, that when major version increases, then something may be deprecated, and in the next version it may disappear. Yeah, that's right. But as we will see, there are a lot of trivial cases in software we use where this still creates problem. So for example here, if you use Kubernetes, you may know it, that the major versions come very often, and 2 major releases in Kubernetes, it may be a year or what. And what that means for the user. So I integrated that service, and I forget it for a year, then I do some upgrade, and OK, my system breaks, or I have some extra work to do because I just wanted to keep with security patches and stuff like that. Well, that's not that user-friendly, is it? And this was software developed by a large multinational company. The developer was paid by the company. So it's also not some unnamed library that some person develops in his spare time over weekends. So with these metrics, I would say, what prevents you from stopping at the deprecation step? Just deprecate it and keep the names forever, or as long as it makes sense for you. It's a good idea to either hide it from the documentation or somehow mark it that, OK, this is not to be used, because someone might Google for those old names and they want to know what they are about. But new users, they value the change you did, that you created consistent naming. That's a value for the new users. But it subtracts value for the existing users, for those that already trusted you. So in this specific case, they can opt in to just keep the names forever. They have the unit tests for them. Just keep them around. So this is like the trick number 1. If it doesn't really hurt you, just keep it there. There is this trick in Python. It's called deprecation warning. There's a module called warnings, and it helps you achieve exactly that. If you put it into a function, then if someone runs this function, they will get a log message that this is deprecated, but they will get it only once per the place in code. No once per call, but once per the place in code. So this will notify the user that this is something that might be interested in changing, but that's it. It doesn't do anything else. If you use an editor that supports this, you will see that it's not clearly seen, but it's strike through. You will see that the method is marked as deprecated, that it should not be used. And yeah, you can stop here, but it looks ugly, doesn't it? It's wrong to keep code that's not supposed to be used, that there's a better method. It's ugly, right? Well, I think it's kind of perfectionism, that we put soul into what we create, into our craft, but the users care about a different kind of perfection. Our users care about features, consistency, performance, things like that. They don't care about our code. So if you value your user's experience, then just learn to hide your old code. It's there, it's fine. Somebody might be still using it. Just learn to hide it. A second example. Library that we were using changed, again, naming convention from camel case to snake case. OK, they deprecated it, and then created those methods that forward to new ones. Fine. Created a deprecation warning. But then they upgraded to version 3, and now the deprecation warning throws an exception. What? They spent extra effort to break my code. Well, OK. Django. I like Django. We use Django. But Django did it as well. There was an argument. It was documented. It doesn't do anything. But it was the example Django documentation. So everyone, including some libraries that we used it in their code. Django 4.0, they removed it. OK? Doesn't do anything. It was documented, doesn't do anything. Maybe you decide it's not a good idea to have parameter like that. Hide it from the documentation. Now, I've been talking a lot about open source, but you may say they're open source, they don't owe you anything. That's right, they don't owe you anything, but I'm talking about your code. If you want to make your users happy, do better. From the positive examples, I would say Amazon with their client library for their cloud. It's called Boto, and they did a pretty big change between their API version 2 and version 3. And I think the change was for the better, but of course it would break everything. So what did they do? They created an entirely new package, and most importantly, they let it coexist in the same code base with the old one. So we still, in MediaBoard, we still have code that uses the old API from, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that. And it still works. That's fine. But they don't add new features, even those that would be fairly simple to implement. They don't add new features to that old API. And that's fair. If I want to use a new feature there, which I had the case, I have to rewrite my code. But this is work on my schedule. This is work on the user schedule. I know I will be touching that code that needs the feature. So it's a compromise I am willing to make. So that's a second trick, that you can let two versions of the API coexist with each other. And let them coexist for a long time, like 10 years maybe more. Depends on your product. Now, when we talk about APIs, the API may be more than what you think. The API may be stuff between front-end and back-end. And I would make the case that, from my experience, it's worth to maintain API stability even for in-house APIs. That's because, from my experience, the development effort is dominated in companies by the coordination effort. And making API stable is, for me, a cheap way to avoid some unnecessary coordination effort. So if you keep your API stable, you don't have to say, OK, so you are still using this API. We will be removing this. Can you do it next week, maybe in a month? OK, so yeah, we can do it, but we plan to do other stuff. OK, we will reschedule. Oh, fine, so everyone is happy. This seems easy, but in the long run, it costs some energy. And maintaining an API stable is a way for you to trade off this coordination effort into a little bit of effort in the code, which is more scalable. You also want to do something that's called minimizing API surface. That means knowing what people can use and what they cannot use. So, for example, a database. I mean, the tables, relationships between them. Is this an API? Well, yeah, for some people, yes. I would say no, because I want to change it very often. But then some colleague from finance comes to you and says, OK, I need to do a monthly report on our users. Can I get access to the users table? It will be just a quick one-off report. I will do it manually. I know some SQL, because here you are. There's the read-only user, but don't rely on it. That may break. OK, for sure. Yeah. And then, in no time, he automates it. There is a monthly report that the business relies on. Then you change the table, and the next month, it's a priority number 1 for the business that they don't have the data for the report. And you broke it. Yet it's your fault. You are not supposed to break stuff that business relies on. So the database has its own tools for that. The database has views, it has functions. And if you use them, you document that, OK, this stuff is needed by someone. It can be unit tested. So use the tools that allow you to minimize the API surface, that you know that people are using this part. But you also need to provide for their use cases. So this is the same, like, I don't know, Pandas had for a long time version 0 point something. And you know that if version is 0 point something, that it may break on upgrade. But if there is a popular library that keeps this versioning for several years, then we are lying to each other, because we know that upgrading this library will cause pain to the users, because of course there is code that's using it. So yeah, try to minimize the API service. Try to communicate that it's not ready yet. Don't rely on it, but also know when people start relying on it. Don't lie to each other. Say, OK, we have this library, we have users, so it was version 0.3, now it's 1.0. Even if we don't like the API that much, we know that it's hard to change now. People are using it because we value the time of our users. You OK? So to sum it up, I would say the first trick is to let the users do the work on their own schedule. That means keeping the old code around, versioning the APIs, but not killing the old versions. I hate if I have to upgrade from version 3 to 4 just for one my little feature, and now I have to upgrade the whole code base. That's hard to do. So let user decide when they want to upgrade. Maintain clear expectations. Communicate with your users. Communicate what they can use, what they cannot use. Use clear versioning. But if this doesn't go as you planned, accept that you have a de facto API. Accept that it's your problem. It's not your fault. No, it's your problem now. So thank you very much for listening, and now it's time for questions.
Thanks for the talk, Filip. Wouldn't leaving old code and features enabled cause a lot of support overhead and decrease the overall code quality?
Yeah. This is something that might happen. It's always a trade-off. Like everything in engineering is a trade-off. Probably depends on how many users do you have, how much you value them. But a lot of the cases I see, are very easily preventable by just keeping the old code around. Very often, it's the renames, and the renames are trivial. Just keep it there, and unless the functionality changes in some fundamental way, it's from my experience, it's often very cheap. It just looks ugly, but this is some instinct you have to overcome. But this is my opinion. Of course, every code base is different. You know.
How can you both provide a stable API and get rid of technical debt and former bad decisions?
Technical debt and
former bad decisions.
Yeah, I think this is part of the perfectionism. The former bad decisions. The old code reminds us that we didn't know as much as we do know now. There was a time where we made this bad decision. Okay, if this is a major decision like the whole API design, you can create a new version. If it's a minor bad decision, you can live with it. It might not bring enough value to change the decision to overcome the drawbacks for the users and to your time developing the new decision, the new version. But yeah, in general, it's to create something that lives aside and just tell users that, okay, this old thing will not get any new features, and this is how we do it now. It's better, but let them use it. Yeah. And technical debt, the API usually should be decoupled from the internal implementation. So it's kind of facade. You should not expose too much how it works internally. So very often, you should be able to change how the service works underneath. It's not always possible, but yeah, it's very specific to the code base.
And what is your opinion on the migration from Python 2 to Python 3?
I expected this question. I think the emotions are still high on that for some people, so I wouldn't go too deep in it. I would just say that it could have been a little bit better prepared, at least. Like if 3.4 would be called 3.0, so that they would skip the first few versions, then the migration would be a lot easier. But no more specific comments on Python 2.3.
Thanks. Do you think this, like keeping old API, will cause an imbalance in responsibility in the responsibility chain of the developer that uses the API and the developer that maintains it?
Well, the developer that uses the API, he's your client, especially if you make commercial software or you develop open source for commercial interests, then yeah, you do work for him. So yeah, I think it's natural that you say that I will do this for you, and then you just do it. I don't know. For me, it's natural to write software for someone.
How do these ideas apply to the GitHub debacle on checksums of archives deprecation? Are you familiar with that?
I think I've heard something, but not sure specifically.
So let's skip that one. What if the new naming conflicts with the old one?
Just one comment on GitHub. I think that might have been security related, right? Now, one thing I didn't mention was that if there is a security problem, that it may overcome the difficulties for both you and users, and it's easier to explain why are you making the change. So if the GitHub issue was related to security, then I can completely understand why they would change it. Sorry, what was the question? The other one?
Yeah, so what if the new naming conflicts with the old one?
It can look ugly. So, for example, Amazon has an API endpoint called list objects, and then it has an API endpoint called list objects v2. Yeah, looks ugly. It's obvious which one you would use. Yeah. You can always find a way.
And how do you know when the extra maintenance costs if the extra maintenance costs are worth having several versions of the API?
Again, it depends on estimation, what those maintenance costs would be. So I would say you need to know what the costs on your site are. If the code is just lying there, it's clearly annotated that this will not change, it's just there for compatibility reasons, then it doesn't need to have any extra cost. So one thing that I would say people might not be doing is that they are eager to clean the old code to avoid those maintenance costs, but they don't estimate what the costs actually are. So my response would be, first estimate what does it cost you to keep it.
Yeah, I'm the guy who asked the GitHub question, so I'm going to clarify. So a few months ago, I don't know how long ago, GitHub decided to upgrade the way the SHA codes were calculated for the commits. They did it somewhat without warning because they weren't expecting anyone to notice. It's part of what, I think it relates to what you said at the beginning of the talk, like API is a way to communicate between two people. It's nothing to do with JSON, XML, that stuff. So the problem was essentially that there was indeed a lot of people who were relying on these stuff, specifically CI pipelines, who were trying to figure out whether the code was malware or there was some supply chain risk involved. So they started falling like a house of cards. So in that case, it wasn't that possible to deprecate other than just give a warning. How would you approach that situation? Like, is there anything on your mindset about these problems? How would you done differently if you done anything different?
So the thing is that now it's a case of a de facto API. That's something that you didn't intend to be API, but it is. In this case, it depends on the reason why it had to be changed. I think it was security related, but not sure on that. If it was, then okay, just do it. If it wasn't security related, you can create some middle layer that translates those. And now you have to estimate whether this cost is worth it. But you can always create, there's a saying that all problems in software can be solved by another layer of abstraction, including too many layers of abstraction.
And how do you reduce the friction of users not using newer APIs if the older ones are still supported? How do you get people to upgrade?
Well, that's the trick. You don't. They upgrade when they need the new features. If they are happy with the old API, they are your users. They like you. They use what you built. They might even pay for it. Just keep it around.
Here's a different one. What's the best tool for publishing API docs?
Well, a few years ago, I would say Apiary. No, there is this. There's this Apiary. There is Open API specification, but use what works for you. It may be a Markdown document that's rendered somewhere. Use what works for you. I usually document for internal purposes, so it's Markdown files all around the GitHub repository. Depends who you make the API for. Probably all of the tools can be used in a similar manner. Just use what your company provides or what feels easiest to you.
And that's all the time we have. Thank you, Filip.
Thank you.